in the co-main event of UFC 274, once again taking place at the Footprint Center in Phoenix, Arizona. In the women's strawweight title bout, Carla, the Cookie Monster Esparza, defeats Thug Rose Namajunas by a split decision. The scores, gentlemen, read 49-46 and 48-47 in favor of Esparza, with Namajunas getting one judge, 48-47. Omar, let me throw it over to you first. First of all, do you think Esparza is the rightful winner of this title, and your overall assessment of the bout?
So I have a feeling Mark will give you a much better breakdown of this fight, because I'm going to tell you something right now. After like the third round, I was checked out of that fight, and I think that was longer than most people. I was sitting down waiting for. I was like, she's gonna do something, right? Somebody's gonna do something at some point. We're measuring things out. Like, you're gonna do something. You never did shit. You never did anything. And it was. I am not an easy person to watch a fight and be like, I hate that fight. That is one of the worst fights I've ever seen in my life.
And a title fight.
I'm not that guy. I'm the guy that sticks up for Tyrone Woodley versus Wonder Boy. Both of them, as far as I'm concerned. Right? I understand they're not rewatchable fights. However, they were good fights in the moment.
Sure.
This was mean to put on for anybody in the audience who paid tickets for that, who sat and watched. I guarantee you people fell asleep watching this fight, 100%. I mean, it was bad all the way around, man. And I think what was even worse was the denial from everybody involved, like deeply involved in that fight, that fight was fucking hot fire garbage all the way around. Like Esparza, at the end of the day, like short of Esparza chasing this girl around the ring, there wasn't a whole hell of a lot Esparza could have done.
Yep.
Other than just, again, like, you know, like Raiden, like just jumping forward and tackling her onto the ground. Rose didn't engage. You know, Rose, I think the statistics too were like all over the place. And I think Rogan pointed out too, he's like, I don't even know where they're getting these numbers from. They must be counting feints and all kinds of things as attempted strikes, because it was true. There was, I don't think they landed anything in round one at all. There might have been a leg kick or two or something like that, but there was nothing getting done. The fifth round, I think by far was the most exciting round that we saw, and even then was very lackluster. I mean, this might go down as the worst fight, let alone the worst championship fight in UFC history. And that's saying something, because there have been some real snoozers in the UFC's history. So
sure.
It was an unfortunate performance, I think, from both. I think especially, and JJ pointed it out, I think, on her Instagram or an interview or something like that. But I did notice that we've seen a lot of evolution from Rose, sans that specific performance. But even then, you can see the footwork evolution and things like that. Whatever game plan they had was just illogical. I know they were saying that Carla is the type of fighter that comes in a lot, and you don't want to get engaged in one of Carla's fights and things like that. I don't know what you think is going to happen. Somebody's got to get engaged with something. That's the point of the fight. You just have to be better than the other fighter in those areas. So to me, that fight just meant that you're still worried about Carla taking you down and whooping your ass on the ground. That's all that I read out of that situation. And she spent 5 rounds being worried about Carla taking her down. And Carla kept the center of the octagon for a majority of that fight. And it really came down to who was in the center of the octagon, because there was nothing else to judge that fight off of.
Yeah.
And it's also one of the fights that from, I think, round 2, I was like, I don't even blame the judges for whatever they do at this point, because this is probably the worst moment in their entire career right now, to have to figure out who won, who lost.
Oh, the judges.
It was in that moment where I was trying to figure out, can they even legally give them a 10-10 round, because it's technically a 10-9 must system. So I'm assuming, must give them a 10 or a 9. I don't think they're allowed to split it into a draw round.
It's just 10-point must. You can give 10-10.
Oh, you can give 10-10s.
Yeah. It's like they kind of try to discourage it, but it is allowed.
Well, if there was ever a time to give 10-10s out, it was in that fight. You could have given out more than one 10-10 in that fight too. But it was disappointing. Mark watched it twice for you people. So
Yeah.
fucking
He didn't watch it twice for himself.
No, God, no.
Listen up and enjoy that, because that's dedication right there. I did not watch that twice. No, sir.
Omar refused. He'd rather
No,
just
sir.
chill and.
Go for it, Mark.
I'm
Right,
not
Mark.
even going to give like the round breakdown that I normally do on rewatches, because I did watch it twice, but it sucked just as fucking much the second time. But on the topic of giving Charles his belt back, I would like for that to happen and for this belt to be made vacant instead. That was the worst title fight of all time. Neither of these girls fought in a way that feels like it's deserving to be a champion. That just sucked. And before anyone jumps all over me for saying no one should be champion, I get it. It's high-level MMA. Sometimes styles clash and we get boring fights, and that's all well and good. But to go 25 entire minutes in a fight where they both knew nothing is happening, and neither girl even tries to remotely push the envelope is a joke. I scored it a draw on the rewatch for what it's worth. I thought round one was the definition of a 10-10. They both landed 2 strikes. How the fuck am I supposed to say someone won 10-9? It was 2 strikes each, 10-10. I scored the next 2 for Carla. I scored the last 2 for Rose. Draw. What I'd like to do is score the fight 0-0 because none of them deserved any of the goddamn rounds. And before I forget to say it, this has always been one of my most hated points in MMA, and it's being brought up again a little bit in this one. There is no to become the champion, you got to do enough to take the belt from the champion. This is not a thing. As soon as that bell rings, the belt should be considered vacant, and both fighters are trying to win it. There's no such thing as, the challenger has to do more to justify taking it from the champion. And I've heard that take in regard to Rose, like, oh, yeah, that fight sucked, but she should have just kept the belt then. Like, no, that's not how this works. There's zero reason to score the fight for one person or another other than what happens in those 25 minutes. It has nothing to do with anything prior to that bell ringing. So the fight had nothing from either girl. It had to be scored for someone, and 2 out of the 3 judges scored it for Carla. They probably pulled a goddamn name out of a hat. But, that's the end. Rose has no one to blame but her coaches and herself. And also she's sitting there saying, don't I get credit for good defense? No. Like, to anyone who's unaware, no, you literally don't. Defense is not something that gets scored in MMA. Offense is what gets scored. Like, you can look it up in the scoring criteria. And I get it, as I mentioned, that both girls came in with a game plan. And the game plans ended up clashing in a way that caused tremendous inactivity, and that neither one wanted to waver off this game plan that they've worked on all camp. But that's not a justification for a shit fight. That's actually a knock on both girls. Like, it's your job to waver. It's your job to figure something else out in there when nothing is working. It's your job to find in-cage, in-fight adjustments and to put yourself slightly at risk if you need to increase your chances of finding success. And neither girl did that. Neither team did that. And Omar said this. It's even more frustrating for me when it comes to Rose because she can do so much more in there. With Carla, it's like, well, if I can't find a way to get inside for takedowns, what else can I really do besides try to bounce around out here? Mm-hmm. Whereas Rose has about 10 different avenues she can take with her skill set. So for Rose and Rose's coaches to have as many on-paper options as they have, yet still watch that fight and just say, yep, keep it up, good going, is inexplicable. And one further point that I wanted to make, I'm glad I remember this, is that has there ever been a better case for open scoring than that fight? How much better would rounds like 4 and 5 have been if Rose is like, fuck, I'm down on these cards right now? Yeah. Like, the whole fight changes. So that's a great example of why open scoring would be great. But no matter how you slice it, that was shit. That was wildly disappointing. And it honestly doesn't feel like to me that either of those girls is even the champion right now. It really doesn't.
Yeah, man. I personally have, ever since I heard of it, loved the idea of open scoring, or at least I think I do. It just makes a lot of sense. In a football game, in a basketball game, in a soccer game, in every other sport, anybody can look up at the scoreboard and be like, and especially in basketball, because like the scores can get so high. You can be like, what's the score? 102 to, okay, we know the score now. Let's go get a bucket. We need a 3 instead of a 2. Or like, you know what you need to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know where the fear comes from with open scoring. Why it's even an argument.
Dana says he's afraid that the fighter who knows they're up would coast. But
I get that. Oh, yeah, I see
that. Dana also says that if you take away fighter fucking win win-loss bonuses or whatever the hell, that they're not going to fight the same way either. That's also a chooch-ass answer. That doesn't mean anything. Like, it's ridiculous. People are there to fight, to make their money, to make their name for themselves. Whether you like the win bonuses, I think, is one of the most criminal things they have in MMA, or at least in the UFC, because I don't think every organization does that shit. Pay these motherfuckers their money. I don't understand that. And I think it's kind of the same thing with what we were just talking about. It just doesn't make any sense. I don't understand.
I mean, I could see how, if it's a 3-round fight or whatever it might be, and I look up at the scoreboard and I see that all 3 judges have me winning the first 2 rounds, I could see many fighters being like, I'm winning. Like, I'm not putting my neck out there in the 3rd round.
But see, the counter to that is that it's going to be hard for them to coast, because the dude who knows he's down 2 rounds is going to be like, fuck it, I got to find a way to kill this guy right now.
Yeah.
So,
I mean,
He's going to run, though. He's going to run. He's just going to be on his skates.
It's hard to worry about, or getting knocked out or whatever, when you already know that you've lost the fight. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I think people would put themselves. I think you'd actually see a lot more competitive final rounds, especially the 3rd and the 5th rounds in a lot of these fights, when people know shit's against the wall.
Yep.
Especially if things are 2-2 going into the 5th round, and it's 2-2 going into the 5th round. You basically have to tell yourself, the whole fight that I just fought doesn't mean shit now.
Yep.
It's this round and this round only that means something. Whereas a lot of guys are like, well, I might have gotten 2, I might have gotten 3, I don't really know. Like, it makes more sense to make things a little bit more concrete, and we have a little bit more accountability too.
Yeah. Yep. And just one final point about this. I think there are creative things that promotions can do with the rule sets to help counteract those kinds of incentives, late fight incentives of fighters who are up. I mean, football has delay of game penalties. Basketball has a shot clock. Basketball has defensive 3 seconds. So what if there's open scoring, but also there's penalties for a fighter who's delaying the fight or not fighting? Aren't there other promotions that have
Pride
all
used to
done
do
similar
it, yeah.
things? Pride did that.
One FC does it. One FC throws up yellow
They do.
cards.
You're right.
And I had to actually look up how they actually use them. So yellow cards they use as they're almost like warnings.
Yes.
Like, once you get 3 yellow cards, then you're disqualified.
Ooh.
So if you get a yellow card for an eye poke or delay of game, like inactivity, something like that. If you do that enough, you'll just get disqualified and you'll just lose the fight. I'm all about yellow cards. I think they need to bring yellow cards over to the U.S.
I'm down too.
Red cards too, for that matter.
Man.
Jan would have gotten a whole red card for that knee to the face way back when.
All right, let's get back on track, gentlemen. Let's talk about where these 2 ladies go from here. Let's start with the winner, Carla Esparza. Omar, let me start with you. What do you think is next for the Cookie Monster, Carla Esparza, in terms of defending her now 2nd title reign of women's strawweight?
It's so frustrating because a part of me wants them to fight again, because that can't be the way that that can't happen every single. That didn't happen the first time they fought. It happened now. I think we all, including Carla and Rose and coaches, Pat Barry has doubled down on his bullshit, but we'll get to that. But I think we're all kind of on the understanding that this fight was shit. And it can't happen like that again. Eventually, let's even say it's not the very next fight. Whenever they do rematch, this can't happen again. That's a given. But the fight feels so far from done. Mm-hmm. And it was, before this point, the fight that needed to happen. So still kind of feels like the fight that needed to, it feels more like the fight that needs to happen now than it did before, because Carla won off of some nonsense. And it doesn't even really feel like Carla's the champ. Carla looked like the person who was less evolved. Like, she hasn't changed one bit of her game since Invicta. And Rose looks completely different since they last fought, 8 years ago, however long it was now at this point. So I would like to see them fight again. I don't think Mark's going to want to see them fight again.
So you're calling for the rematch.
But I think it's necessary. I just can't imagine them being that boring a second, third time, I guess, at this point around.
Okay, Mark, bringing you in here, putting the matchmaker hat back on. In terms of Esparza, what do you see next for her second title reign's first defense?
Personally, I don't hate being like, you two have to do this again. That was shit, and we need to see who wins.
Totally.
But there is no way they make that trilogy.
Yeah.
Maybe one day down the road, but there's no shot it happens right now. For Carla, I'd have to imagine it is going to be the winner of Joanna and Weili 2, and that they're going to get an immediate shot at Carla and honestly probably be the favorite, especially coming off of that performance from Carla.
Yeah.
Dude, I think if Joanna fights Carla again, like I said, Carla doesn't look like anything has changed in her game in the last however many years at this point.
Yeah.
And Joanna whooped her ass the first time, and that was before Joanna knew how to really like stop people from taking her down.
Yeah.
And now Joanna's been at ATT for 5+ years. So that girl's been working with wrestlers nonstop. I think she murks, like absolutely destroys Carla Esparza. So
Yeah. I think they both will.
yeah.
Tough thing for looking at the rankings now. Tough thing for Namajunas. Quite a few of the girls at the top of strawweight, she has already fought twice, each of them. She's fought Weili twice. She's fought Esparza twice. She's fought Andrade twice. So there are fewer options for Namajunas. All right. Unless you guys want to throw out any names for Thug Rose in terms of her next opponent.
Yeah, I think you could definitely do the trilogy with Andrade, considering it's 1-1 and it was, dramatic moments in that rivalry so far. Or she could just fight Marina Rodriguez, who's right there.
That fight.
Granted, I was saying last week, and it still wouldn't shock me if the booking is Andrade against Rodriguez,
Right.
which, in which case is going to leave Rose waiting. Maybe she would get the winner of it if that's what gets booked. But I think either of them work. But honestly, between Carla, Rose, Weili, Joanna, Marina, Andrade, and even like Hebos and Dern I would throw in there, that division suddenly feels crazy wide open. And it really didn't like a week ago. Like I feel like all of a sudden there's like a million girls who could be champ by the time this year ends in my head. I honestly wish the UFC did tournaments because that would work really well here. Just be like, hey, listen, you both suck, so no one gets this belt. We're doing a big-ass tournament. But, of course, we won't get that.
Yeah, yeah.